guys, Cass here from GiveWave Studios, and today I'm going to show you how to turn this stack of materials right here into this Erik Killmonger. Is it a machete? Is it a sword? I'm not really sure, but it's in the movie. Let's make it. So one of the first steps we're going to take is grab our little stacks of foam. You're going to notice that one of these sets is larger than the other, so there are 3 of these that are the same size, the smaller ones, and there are 2 of these that are the same size, the larger ones, and then there's a stack of extra large ones that are 3 wide. You have the GiveWave logo in the back, or if you're ashamed of me and my kit and you want to hide it, you can go ahead and flip it to the other side. That's going to be the bottom of your pommel, and this top piece right here is where this is going to go. So first thing you're going to do is just assemble these together with some contact cement. I'm going to fast forward through the steps and catch you guys at the next one. And as you put these pieces together, make sure that the edges are nice and aligned with each other. You'll notice that I'll use pieces like these. This is literally the same thing as this. It's just that this happens to be 10 millimeters. These happen to be 2 5 millimeters that you put together to make one 10 millimeter. This is a lot easier for the kit because it's smooth on both sides, whereas this has a texture on the other. So whenever you see me use these, just know that I'm referring to these and yours. And obviously the larger size, use it when prompted, and use the smaller size one when prompted. All right, moving on. Grab this stack of little foam strips, and what we're gonna do, usually I have people sand the edges, but since this is so short of an edge, we're not really gonna sand it. We're just gonna use an X-Acto and cut off just the part that's sanded so we reveal the smooth side of the foam. We're gonna do that for both sides on all of them. Do a nice straight cut, and then we're gonna curve these into each other and glue as a ring. All right, so I'm gonna go through that process right now. All right, so with all our pieces done, we can start putting these over our pipe. I just like to leave just about like a millimeter's worth of space in between each ring, and then just run that all the way up and down the handle. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through that process, and I'll catch you guys on the next step. All right, so before I go any further with my handle, I'm gonna go ahead and use some wood glue. Now you can also do this with like regular old Elmer's glue all, which is water-based, so you can definitely like wash this down if need to. All I'm gonna do is just drag my brush in the middle and just get some glue where the tube meets the foam. And I'm gonna do that for all of my gaps. And then I'll catch you guys at the next step. Alright, so next we're gonna grab this piece, and what you guys are gonna do is basically just kind of sand off the edges a little bit so that you get something a little bit more like this. It's a little softer edges, so you can use a Dremel for this or sandpaper and just manually just scrub that down with a nice fine grit until you get something that's a little bit more shaped like this. And we're also going to receive 3 of these little circles, right? And you'll notice that the one on the far left here is slightly larger than the other 2, all right? And there's a reason for this. This is the one that you're going to glue to the center of the bottom of your handle here, and that's going to fit nice and tight into the inside of your tube. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that with some barge contact cement. Kind of spread. And once you do this, you can also glue this shut into the handle, or you could leave it removable if you want to stash some stuff inside of it. I'm not judging. But usually I would just seal that off, only because it's not like the sword has lights or anything like that. So, all right, go ahead and place my piece. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and grab my handle that's dried at this point, so I can kind of roughhouse it a little bit. And I'm gonna bring this down nice and flush and centered. And glue that in place. Now once I pull this out, I have my bottom piece. All right, so that's that. We have ourselves a handle. And now let's move on to the next step. You'll notice that your pieces are mirror images of each other, and there are lines on what is the inside of your pieces. So keep in mind that this is the inside of your piece, not the outside. So these face each other like so. This is a little detail that I found that actually exists on the model of Killmonger's machete sword thingy. And what you guys are gonna do for this is grab something that's not necessarily pointy, maybe the back of a paintbrush or something like that, and then just kind of push. You see how I'm getting these little raised bumps here? So basically what you're doing is you're pushing the circle out just enough so that it shows up on the other side, okay? So you don't want to overdo this because you will poke a hole through the piece. So put your finger on the back of the piece and just kind of push slowly. Once you feel it, turn it around, take a look, make sure that's as far as you want it, and then just keep that process going. After each press, right, when you kind of see the back of your paintbrush kind of show up on the surface, right, grab a marker, preferably something silver, and make a mark, right? And so every time you push and you see where you're pushing on the surface, go ahead and make a mark. And you're gonna do that until you transferred all of the dots over to this side. All right, so I'm gonna run through that step and catch you guys at the next one. All right, so once you've gone ahead and transferred all of your dots, don't worry if they're not exactly spaced the same from each other. They're actually not in the laser edge details because this is meant to look like it's, you know, it's handmade. So there are there's room for error in it, you know, because it's made by hand. So now what I'm gonna do is grab my hot glue gun. I'm gonna use it at a low temperature, and basically I'm going to get up close and just put a little bit of a dot right there. So if there are any ones that you've done while it's still kind of fresh that you don't like, for example, this one right here, I'm like, wow, this one's a little bit too wonky, you can just flick it right off as the glue has cooled down. What's going to hold these in place is the paint that you're going to put on top of it, so they won't be able to do that. So, you know, if something did go wrong and I was just like, I don't really like that one that much, I can just kind of go back in and reapply or just remake another one. Also, what I do is once I've dabbed it down, I kind of pull straight up until the string just thins out to the point where it disappears, and then I'll move on to the next. So I'll go here, kind of drop it down, and then pull the string straight up. That does two things. It eliminates the need to clean up the string afterwards. Also, pulling straight up does also give it more of a circular feel. So even if you did mess up a little bit on the shape, but you pull it straight up, it becomes a little bit more blobby and circular, like a circle. I really don't know how else to explain it, but it works. So yeah, this isn't a perfect process. I just messed up this whole thing while talking. So this can take a while, but if this is something that you're willing to go through, it can be a really, really nice detail once everything is said and done. So this is kind of what this can become when you're done, if you've done it properly. This is just plasti dipped, it hasn't been painted yet, but you can tell I'm really forcing my finger and trying to push this off. It's not gonna come off because the paint has literally just kind of like fused it to the foam. So they're one and the same right now. So you don't have to worry about these falling off at this point after you've done a proper paint job on it, especially after you've plasti dipped the whole thing. This was at least 3 coats of plasti dip. And I allowed the plasti dip to kind of pool a little bit around those circles so that it looks like it's more part of the entire piece as opposed to just sitting there. Once you are completely done and are satisfied with all of your little dots, what I would suggest is turning on your heat gun, going over what you just did ever so slightly. Don't stay too long on it. You don't want to remelt these too much, but you want to add just enough heat that whatever little leftover strings or anything like that are completely melted, and then you can just push everything into itself, because now it's kind of like tacky and a little bit sticky. So any strings that may have been cut too close and were unsightly, now you can just get them to just melt with everything else, and also take advantage of the current temperature to kind of, like I mentioned earlier, just push everything in a little bit to make these beads look a little bit more inset as opposed to just sitting on the surface. All right, moving on to the next step. We're gonna grab our skewers that come with your kit, and what we're gonna do is use some hot glue to just kind of glue these down. Some of these, well, most of these won't be necessarily straight. So whatever the curved side is, make sure it faces down so that once you glue it, it's forced to stay straight. Because if you put it so that the curve is on its side, that's gonna show on the outside of your piece. So do make sure that it's glued down straight. Bead myself a nice long row here. It doesn't matter if it's clean or messy, like this is really not gonna show up on the outside. Just put enough that you can just kind of hold this in place while we work on it. So I have one down. I'll go ahead and grab my other one. This one has a slight curve out this way, so I'm gonna put that curve facing down directly. All right, so like this. You can kind of tell if I put it up, it just kind of falls down, so you can get a sense of where the curve of your stick is, if it even has a curve, but most of the times they do. So worth mentioning. All right. And that's that. So now we're also going to figure out placement for the spine of our piece. Have your handle from earlier, and we're going to look at this, and so about at the halfway point of the handle, make sure that the stick can fit up until the halfway point, and then mark that edge and know that this is where it sticks out. So it should come out to about the shorter row of holes here. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. It should be at about hole 4 that the tip of this lands, but do trace where this lands, because this one we're going to put down with some contact cement. Rather put this down with some contact, just enough that it has some bite, because this whole thing is going to get glued together and nothing's going to really shift. So I'm not too worried if I don't put a copious amount of barge. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just bring a line out so I know that this is where the tip stops. Right there. And put this down the middle. So you should have equal distance between this piece and this piece. So we've got that. So we're gonna go ahead and grab some contact cement, and we're gonna glue the two halves together. Focus a lot of your glue on the kind of like the spaces in between, because we're gonna need a lot of glue there, well, especially some good contact there, so that we can press the pieces up against each other and we can start kind of seeing these details on the outside of the piece. So I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward through this barging process and catch you guys at the next step. All right, now to start the gluing process. You're gonna want to start at the top edges. Make sure that the holes line up and make sure that only what you're gluing down is touching. So you guys want to line up your edges nice and clean. Start at the tip here, right? And then run the two pieces down alongside each other and make sure that the edges are nice and aligned. And then you're going to want to make sure that these holes up top are perfectly aligned. Just kind of like look at them from above. Make sure that everything sits the way that it should. Okay, once that's all set, just kind of run your piece down to the sides again, making sure that everything is nice and aligned. So I would just do one side at a time, right? Making sure that everything is nice and flush on the edge, and then move on to the other side. It's easy to do this a side at a time because there's enough material on the other side pushing the foam away from the edge, so that you can just kind of work one side at a time. And then once you've got that down, again, making sure that things are nice and flush and perfectly aligned. Go ahead and move on to the other side. I'm gonna fast forward, catch you guys at the next one. Now, once everything is put together, what you're gonna start doing is pressing where you know there is a gap in between the pieces. And what that's gonna start doing is reveal the detail of the spines that we've put in here on the outside. All right, another way you can do this is grabbing the rounded back of a Sharpie, right, and just tracing that down. And you want to do that on the outer edge and the inside edge. All right, so I've got one side, and then making sure that we do the same thing on the other side, because we want that detail to show up on both sides. And try to feel for the stick on the inside as you drag this down. Okay, and make sure you are dragging down towards you and not the other way around, because you will catch an edge and potentially damage your foam, and you don't want to do that at this point. It's too much work put in to mess up now. Once everything is all done, you start seeing your details on the outside a little better and better. Go ahead and grab your heat gun, and we're going to heat the surface to kind of clean it up a little bit of any lines our Sharpie may have left. And at this point, all of those details on the outside should remain. Without any of the stress marks that we might have put on the foam as we were doing this process. All right, gonna go ahead and grab a Dremel with a nice drum sanding bit, and we're going to give ourselves an edge here on our machete.
One side down here. We're going to do the same on the other side.
So as you guys can see, I have a blade edge here and a blade edge there. And we're gonna do that all the way around until we get to the other side. There's no need to do that down there. We'll get to this in a second. But yeah, that's basically the step. I'm not gonna use a Dremel because I have some better tools at the shop. But I'll take you guys along for a ride regardless. But you can do this with a Dremel. So, all right, now you can tell we have a nice edge on our blade side to side. If you wanted to scuff up your blade, do a couple of nicks on the edge or breaks or anything like that, now would be the time to do that. And we're gonna move on to the next step. All right, so I got a little ahead of myself earlier with these pieces. You definitely want to do your edges first, and then you're gonna grab this piece, and there is a short end to it and a long end. So the short end is here, the long end is here. All right, so short end, long end. So the part that has a little bit more curve to it is where you want to. So you want to slide that in there, right, and you're gonna glue this in place right here. All right, a little guard is up. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put these pieces back where they belong. All right, so now we have our blade and we have our handle. Go ahead and slide that in. Like a glove. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep these separate in order to make my paint job a lot easier. So I'm gonna paint this the bronze color that it is, and this obviously do some silver, and we'll get into painting in a second. All right, so we're in the paint booth. First, we're gonna coat our parts with Plasti Dip. I'm gonna do about 2 coats on the handle and about 3 coats on the sword itself, and that mostly has to do with getting the Plasti Dip to kind of pool around this a little bit so that it kind of holds it in place and it looks like it's more part of the sword. And after that, I'm gonna grab some chestnut forged hammer Rust-Oleum and do that for the handle. And I'm also gonna do some hammered Rust-Oleum silver on the blade itself. All right. All right, as you guys can see, we got our sword nice and painted, looking good. All the bumps is looking nice. Handle is looking lovely. So now we're gonna do some weathering to the prop. And I'm gonna show you guys how to do that. Weathering our prop. So what I did is just gonna grab some. Oh, it's not opening. Ah, motherfucker. Gotcha, bitch. All right, opened up. So what I did is I had some leftover acrylic paint. I dumped some water in it and diluted it a little bit. So you want something that's kind of, it's not too watery in consistency. So there's still a good amount of pigment in your mixture, and you're literally just gonna splatter it all over the thing. I'm just gonna paint the whole thing black. Cloth and just kind of wipe everything off. So I'll come back to once this has dried for a little bit. Now we've given our paint enough time to semi-dry. We're gonna go ahead and grab a cloth. This is a dry cloth, right? So we're just gonna do a light pass over everything. Just kind of get everything off of the surface. If you used the hammered paint, what this is gonna do is kind of let some of the paint sink into the little holes that the paint kind of leaves behind, and that's gonna help us further down the line when we do a little bit more weathering. So I'm gonna go ahead and repeat this step a couple of times, and then I'll catch you guys at the next part. In case you guys couldn't tell, we started picking up the texture left behind by the paint quite nicely with these couple of washes already, right, as you can see. So this was about 4 washes on each side, and then each wash focusing more on where I wanted the darker areas to be. So for example, once we're all set with that, we're gonna go ahead and grab some rub and buff, and what we're gonna do now is work on some highlights. The first thing I'm gonna do is bring some color to the edges. You don't have to use rub and buff for this stuff if you don't want to. You can just as well use a paintbrush and a lighter silver color to do some of this highlighting. I find that the rub and buff leaves a very like uneven finish, especially when applied with your finger like this on the edge, which lend itself really well to kind of like a handmade tool that's had a good amount of use to it. So go ahead, keep fast forwarding through this process, and catch you guys with the final result. Alright, I'm done with my handle. I've added some nice highlights to it and some distressing to it, and now I'm just going to stick my blade back in there. You can go ahead and glue these two at this point if you haven't yet, with some hot glue or with some contact cement, whatever you choose, and that's simple enough. I don't have to show you guys how to do that. So that's pretty much it, guys. This is it. Your Killmonger machete is ready from the GiveWave Studios DIY kit. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hope the tutorial was helpful. And if you bought the kit from the Etsy store, thanks for the support. If you're just watching it so you can make your own Killmonger and are trying to get some inspiration, I hope this was helpful to you as well. If you guys have any questions or concerns, feel free to leave them in the comment section. I try to read those as much as possible and answer when I can. And this is Cass from GiveWave Studios, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Cheers!